Good evening. I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Friday, September 30th. And today, Canada marks the second annual National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. This is a day where ceremonies, marches, and gatherings can be seen across the country. But for those who were directly impacted by the decades of abuse and prejudice, September is a month of tears. The Assembly of First Nations National Chief, Roseanne Archibald, said today is about survivors of Canada's residential schools and the children who died. The federal holiday was established after suspected unmarked burial sites were discovered at residential schools around the country. Well, joining us now to tell us more about his own perspective as a residential school survivor is Mr. Bruce Allan, educator and support worker at the Indian Residential School Survivors Society. He joins us today from the former site of Lejack Indian Residential School. Mr. Allan, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Hello.
Now, it's a very somber event today, Mr. Allan, especially for you, considering that you're actually at the site of the former residential school that you, your grandmother, and father attended. So, can you tell us a little bit more about what's going through your mind today and the overall sentiment being felt over at the former grounds of Lejack?
Well, meet up with several survivors, people that I've gone to school with, and a lot of the older elders who are here sharing their stories. I think that part is very important for the younger generations to hear is the actual experiences. And partnered with that, I guess, is along with the stories is the culture and language and the traditional songs that have been sung and shared. So that part is healing for our people, and our we see family here, and family is supporting the survivors, and it's easier for them to come here and to do that. A lot of survivors won't even. The highway is just over the hill here, and a lot of them will just drive by and not look at the school site. They'd rather not do that. They'd just rather pass by. So it's quite painful. The memories are quite painful. Eh, and so the ones that are sharing some really heartfelt stories. Um, but there's lots of support here. We have counselors and therapists and family, and so that's how they're getting through that.
And that support is so important, Mr. Allan. Now, I want to go back to what Chief Archibald said today. She said that today is a day to remember the survivors of the residential school system and those who died. So, as a survivor yourself, Mr. Allan, how do you want Canada to remember?
Well, I think we should listen to the stories. I listen to the stories of survivors as much as we can, but at the same time, learn about those cultures that are close by you. Learn about those residential schools that are near your location, and find stories. The stories directly related to the residential schools, but also those horrific stories with the unmarked graves, but also the positive. What are the communities doing today? For us, we're looking into the future. We're looking for probably mobile um, mental health units to come to our communities to help those survivors and the children and grandchildren. Um, for the future, I think these are important steps for the truth to come out, and also for reconciliation.
All right, Mr. Allan, we've got a quick 45 seconds left here, but if there was one message you could give to our officials who are celebrating today, what would it be?
Well, I think looking for funding and programs and support for our many communities who are affected by residential schools. We have a lot of communities that are isolated and remote, so we need to start looking for ways to help support those areas, but to continue to support those communities that have uh, easier access on most. So,
Always a very important conversation, Mr. Allan. Thank you again for your time today.
hey, thank you very much.
Stay with us. We'll be right back after a short break on Forum Daily News. The federal Crown Indigenous Relations Minister says the government is committed to reconciliation. This comes as Canada observes the second annual National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Mark Miller says the government will work to keep reconciliation entrenched in Canada's daily and long-term goals. The federal statutory holiday was established last year. This was following the discovery of suspected unmarked burial sites at former residential schools. Assembly of First Nations National Chief Roseanne Archibald says the day is an opportunity to pause and reflect on the impact of the schools in Canada's history. Well, cleanup continues on the East Coast, days after Fiona, and hundreds of homes and businesses are still without electricity. The post-tropical storm roared through Atlantic Canada and eastern Quebec, yanking down power lines in its path. Utility companies are warning that some people may be without power into next week. This comes as crews work on repairing damaged service masts or previously undetected problems at the neighborhood level. At the height of the storm, more than 90% of Maritime Electric's customers were in the dark, and the same goes for 80% of Nova Scotia Power's customers. All right, switching gears to the war in Ukraine, as Russian President Vladimir Putin opened a Kremlin ceremony today, starting the process of absorbing parts of Ukraine into Russia. The annexation of 4 regions from Ukraine into Russia goes against international law. This in what many world leaders have called sham referendums. Mr. Putin has warned Ukraine against trying to reclaim the regions. He said Russia wouldn't hesitate to use all means available to protect its new territory. All right, well, meanwhile, Ukraine's president says that his country is submitting an accelerated application to join the NATO military alliance. The fast-tracked application comes after Russia announced it would formally annex 4 regions of Ukraine in defiance of international law. Mr. Putin's land grab and President Volodymyr Zelensky's signing of the NATO membership application has cranked up fears of a full-blown conflict between Russia and the West. Well, Vladimir Putin is also accusing the West of sabotaging Russian-built gas pipelines under the Baltic Sea to Germany. The charge has been denied by the United States and its allies. The claim by Mr. Putin comes ahead of an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council. Mr. Putin claims that the Anglo-Saxons in the West have turned from sanctions on Russia to terror attacks. Moscow says it wants a thorough international probe to assess the damage to the pipelines, which carry Russian natural gas to Europe. Well, with a revived Hurricane Ian hitting coastal South Carolina and the city of Charleston with severe flooding, many residents have left for higher ground. Ian left a large swath of destruction after it came ashore on Wednesday on Florida's Gulf Coast. It left 7 people dead and more than 2 million without power. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says rescue crews have gone door to door to over 3,000 homes in the hardest hit areas. It appears that there has been another coup in Burkina Faso. Over a dozen members of the military appeared on the country's state broadcaster on Friday. They declared they have overthrown the country's previous coup leader. In a statement, a spokesman declared that Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henry Sanadogo Damibe was no longer in control of the country. They say Captain Ibrahim Traore is Burkina Faso's new leader. Afghanistan aid groups are criticizing the Trudeau government, saying it is dragging its feet when it comes to humanitarian assistance. They say other countries have made adjustments to their anti-terrorism rules to allow for humanitarian assistance for Afghanistan, but Canada has not. In June, a multi-party committee called on the government to modify the criminal code. This so that major humanitarian groups can help Afghans without being charged with assisting the Taliban. A wave of retirements in several sectors is about to hit Canada. Now, this comes as an increasing number of workers are retiring before they turn 65. The Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives has released a new analysis of labor force survey data. It found that 73,000 more people retired in the year ending August compared to last year. Well, that's up 32%. Over half of those excess retirements were in four industries: healthcare, construction, retail, trade, and education. All right, moving to the semifinals of the Women's World Cup of Basketball in Australia. The United States defeated Canada 83 to 43. The Americans will face China for the gold medal next, while Canada will take on Australia for bronze. It's the first time that Canada has played in the medal round at the event since finishing third in 1986. All right, Forum Daily will be right back after the break. And when we return, we're going to be taking a look at gas prices and energy policies. We'll be joined by Dan McTeague of GasWizard.ca. So stay tuned. Forum Daily will be right back after a short break. Welcome back. It's now time for Forum Daily's weekly energy update with Dan McTeague, Senior Petroleum Analyst at GasWizard.ca. Take it away, Dan.
Well, hello, and thank you again, Nima. What a week we've seen here on the energy front right across the country. Obviously, gasoline is the big deal, but there's a lot of movement, obviously, on other forms of energy related to gasoline, related to diesel, natural gas, the Nord Stream disruptions, sabotage. Word is now, of course, there's maybe 4 events on both lines. That hasn't had any real impact yet on energy prices, surprisingly so, because it basically leaves Europe extraordinarily vulnerable. And it looks like market traders who seem to be practicing the obsession with recession aren't seeing the forest for the trees. And so you get circumstances like we saw across Canada, where prices now, as I predicted last week, would start to move up dramatically so in the case of Vancouver, which I thought would start to see prices going down. But instead, we're seeing an example of what happens when you cut off pipelines. You don't allow enough energy to get into your own backyard. You regulate industries. You create a scenario, not just obviously in British Columbia or in Canada, but in the United States and the West Coast, particularly California, where you have boutique gasoline that no one else can produce. And so when refineries have upsets or go through planned maintenance, demand remains robust. The supply just isn't there. And so we've seen a spike in Vancouver to levels never seen before of any city anywhere in North America. $2.42 a liter today. It may come down a little bit this week. I believe it will. But that works out to about $6.80 US a gallon if I'm using an exchange rate of $1.37.1, $1.37.2. So it looks like reaching new highs isn't simply the function of oil prices. It has a lot to do with local economics on gasoline. And that, I think, sets the stage for what we're going to see for the rest of the country and for the rest of the season. Winter is coming. Demand for oil will increase. Remember, for all those who thought it was cute that the Biden administration deliberately used its strategic petroleum reserve to somehow bring down prices, which to some extent worked, you still have to replace it. And you're not replacing it at what you bought it for, $30, $40, and $50 a barrel. You're replacing it at $80, $90, and $100 a barrel. So that's going to be on the American taxpayer, and it's ultimately going to be reflected in the fact that in an era where there is so limited supply, or supply has been severely challenged over the years by underinvestment and, of course, higher demand post-COVID, those two factors alone are likely to lead to a very surprising and very painful outcome for Canadians as they appear by some to be heading to a recession. That aside, I would expect that British Columbia's prices are going to remain where they are, elevated in the interior, 185 plus. Vancouver could see about a 10-cent decrease as refineries get back up and running. For Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta, you've already seen the 20 and 30-cent increase. We're likely to see that come down maybe 3 or 4 cents a liter, but not much more than that. That's a function of what's happening in the U.S. Midwest, something called PAD 3, where a refinery had gone down, has come back up since. That is the BP plant in Whitting, Indiana. And of course, right after that, the other BP plant in Toledo, Ohio, which didn't just blow up. It's not likely to be repaired anytime soon. So that's going to leave the U.S. Midwest market chronically short of fuel as we go through winter, especially diesel. That's obviously going to have a direct impact on Canadian Midwest prices or prairie prices. For Ontario, look for about a 4 cent up and down. So we're 156.5, it's 56.9, dropping down to about $1.53, maybe $1.52 by this time next week. Same for Quebec. Look for about an average up and down of 4 cents a liter, staying in the 165, 170 range. For the Maritimes, you're looking at the same scenario. It follows the Eastern Canadian pattern, which of course is based on the New York Harbor spot price for gasoline, which is really in a bit of a turf war, if you will, or a tug of war. But that really means that all eyes will be focused next Wednesday on what OPEC does. It is clear that they are going to cut 500,000 to perhaps 1 million barrels of production a day on paper. Whether they do that or not is a different matter. There are many that suggest that they haven't actually lived up to their commitment to increase production over the past several months. That aside, those traders out there that are obsessed with recessions and Chinese demand and whatnot are finally going to have to face a reality of a market that is critically undersupplied when it comes to the very things that we need as we're heading into colder weather. That's oil, that's diesel, that's jet fuel, heating fuel, furnace oil, and of course, bringing gasoline on for the ride. Well, look, Nima, that's it for this week. I'll have more good news perhaps next week, but for now, brace for impact. Things are going to get a lot more expensive in the future.
Always lots to consider. Thanks again for that, Dan. Again, that was Dan McTeague, Senior Petroleum Analyst at GasWizard.ca. He is also the president of Canadians for Affordable Energy. Stay with us. We'll have our weekly crypto update up next. Stay tuned. Welcome back. It's now time for Forum Daily's weekly crypto and digital asset update with Catherine Murray, host of The Buck Stops Here. All yours, Catherine.
Thanks, Nima. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your weekly crypto and digital asset update. I'm Catherine Murray. Well, we are seeing crypto trading a little bit mixed today. It looks as though Bitcoin will end the week up by about 1% week over week, just under 20,000. The total market cap is just over $950 billion for all cryptocurrencies, so under that $1 trillion mark. And of course, it's a fraction of what we see as it relates to the equity markets globally. But nonetheless, it's interesting. There's been a lot of activity this week. We're seeing volumes 2 times the 30-day average amid movement in currencies. We know that US dollar has been so strong. There's been a lot of downward pressure to the Canadian dollar, as well as other major currencies versus the US dollar, given the very hawkish Fed and also a risk-off sentiment globally across all assets. So that is actually also playing into cryptocurrencies in terms of wanting to trade and being active in the market. We're always keeping our eyes, of course, on the use cases for crypto and digital assets. Interesting here, the equity trading platform, that is Robinhood, has actually launched a self-custody wallet in beta form. It's a standalone app within the Apple Store. It allows users to trade and swap crypto without network fees. Remember, this is a free trading platform. There were actually 10,000 iOS customers globally on the wait list. Robinhood appears to be aiming to emulate what it did with crypto trading for what they did with stock trading for crypto trading. In other words, get a lot of people on the platform and make it easy to use and free to use. Meanwhile, we're also keeping our eyes on Auction House Christie's. It's a 256-year-old institution. They have launched Christie's 3.0 marketplace. It's a new platform built so that transactions are recorded in full on the Ethereum blockchain. Another great use and reason why blockchain is being utilized by companies. In other words, you want to know who owns the assets, a lot of transparency, and also, of course, make sure that you continue to own without losing your paper records. Away from that, Brazilian digital bank Nubank has apparently more than 1.8 million users for its crypto platform. It announced that it was launching a crypto platform back in May. It launched in June, and as you can see, with 1.8 million users, obviously there's a very strong appetite and a growing appetite for digital assets among consumers in South America. Meanwhile, Meta, or the former Facebook as it's known, is now allowing users in the United States to connect their crypto wallets to Instagram or Facebook and allow NFT, non-fungible tokens, sharing. Again, this is only in the United States. This has been long awaited in terms of the digital collectible feature, NFT, as I mentioned. The functionality has been in testing mode since May, but on Thursday of this week, it did become available again to US users. And this comes on the heels of the CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, selling an NFT of his childhood baseball card for $105,000. Meanwhile, as we look at the central banks and their activity within the space, the ECB is preparing for broad digital currency adoption. They seem to look at themselves as unlikely to be the first mover, but they are analyzing options to integrate decentralized ledger technology, according to an ECB board member. We're also always, of course, keeping our eyes on funding. As we know from the equity market perspective, there's been a real freeze, a winter as it relates to IPOs or initial public offerings. You've continued to see investors move into the crypto and digital asset space. Obviously, it's been maybe a little bit slower as of late with a lot of bankruptcies occurring. But nonetheless, Pantera Capital is planning to raise $1.25 billion for a second blockchain fund. Again, it goes to show you that there continues to be an appetite. And just to follow up here, we've talked a lot about the crypto exchange FTX bidding for Voyager. Well, they actually won the bid. FTX billionaire, young billionaire, Sam Bankman-Fried, the head of the company, obviously did well in terms of getting those bids for Voyager assets. Lastly, South Korean prosecutors say that Interpol has issued a red notice for Terraform Labs co-founder Do Kwon surrounding the collapse of his project Terra or Luna or Terra USD. Remember, these were the two companies that went bankrupt and essentially wiped away $60 billion worth of crypto assets at the beginning of the crypto freeze that we've been reporting on. Nima, I'll leave it there. Back to you.
All right, thanks for that, Catherine. Again, that was Catherine Murray, host of The Buck Stops Here, which airs on Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. only on the News Forum Network. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and this was Forum Daily News. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time.